Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said that Iran will show Israel no mercy as the air war between the two enters its sixth day, despite a call from U.S. President Donald Trump for Iran's unconditional surrender. Khamenei made the comment on a post on social media platform X, saying that Iran must give a strong response to the Israeli regime. This comes after Trump warned on social media that U.S. patience was wearing thin. While he said there was no intention to kill Iran's leader for now, his comments suggested a more aggressive stance towards Iran as he weighs whether to deepen U.S. involvement. According to reports, an Israeli official has also confirmed that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been in frequent contact with President Donald Trump, speaking with him almost daily since the conflict erupted last week. Their most recent phone call took place shortly before Trump convened a National Security Council meeting at the White House. Moreover, reports suggest that Trump's emergency meeting in the Situation Room of the White House, which lasted an hour and 20 minutes, was held to discuss whether the U.S. should join Israel to strike Iranian nuclear sites. Meanwhile, Iran and Israel launched new missile strikes at each other. The Israeli military said that 2 barrages of Iranian missiles were launched towards Israel in the first 2 hours of Wednesday morning as explosions were heard over Tel Aviv. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps have stated that hypersonic missiles were used during the latest attack on Israel. Israel told residents in a southwestern area of Tehran to evacuate so its air force could strike Iranian military installations. Meanwhile, explosions were heard in eastern Tehran, according to reports. Local Iranian media said Israel was attacking a university linked to Iran's Revolutionary Guards in the east of the capital. Reports also indicated that Israel was also attacking the Hojir ballistic missile facility near Tehran, which was also targeted by Israeli airstrikes last October. Meanwhile, world elections have been pouring in amid escalating hostilities between Israel and Iran. In South America, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro condemned Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's military actions and urged the American public to reject U.S. involvement. In the Israel-Iran war, Maduro called for peace, saying one voice rises, no to war. Here's what the Venezuelan president has said.
Basta de la locura de Netanyahu contra los pueblos musulmanes, los pueblos árabes y los pueblos del mundo. Le hago un llamado al pueblo de Estados Unidos, al pueblo noble que se ha visto en las calles recientemente. Solo el pueblo de Estados Unidos puede derrotar la locura de que Estados Unidos se involucre en la guerra. Es un llamado que hacemos desde la Venezuela pacifista, desde la Venezuela bolivariana, que desde las calles, de todos los rincones, de norte a sur, de este a oeste, en los Estados Unidos de Norteamérica, se levante una sola voz. No a la guerra, no a la guerra, no war, no war, no war. Al gobierno de la República Popular China, al gobierno de Rusia, al gobierno de Turquía, al gobierno de los países del Consejo del Golfo, Qatar, Emiratos Árabes, Arabia Saudita, Kuwait, y a todos los países del sur global, pero en especial a los países musulmanes, que acompañemos a la República Islámica de Irán en su deseo de paz, en su derecho de paz, en el derecho del pueblo de Irán, y paremos y se pare esta locura.
French President Emmanuel Macron, while speaking at the G7 summit in Canada, warned that any attempt to change Iran's regime would lead to chaos in the Middle East. Macron emphasized the need for diplomacy and urged the United States to play a central role in restarting talks with Tehran. He said he believes President Donald Trump prefers a ceasefire between the warring sides. Let's listen in to what he has said.
De manière constante, le président Trump avec qui j'ai les meilleures relations du monde, et dans sa première mandat, et aujourd'hui. Il a fait une chose, c'est qu'il essaie d'obtenir la paix. À chaque fois ce qu'il dit. Et je ne l'ai jamais vu se joindre à des opérations militaires. Donc je pense en effet qu'il essaie de mettre la pression dans cette situation. C'est sans doute ça. Mais enfin, mon rôle n'est pas de faire des spéculations, de les commenter. C'est au président, à son administration, d'expliciter leur position, pas à moi de le faire. On a besoin des États-Unis d'Amérique pour faire revenir tout le monde autour de la table.
On the other hand, in Turkey, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has accused Netanyahu of being the biggest threat to regional peace. In a phone call with Qatar's Emir, Erdogan said he would continue working to end the violence and denounced Netanyahu's actions as destabilizing the entire Middle East. Now we have guests joining us for this discussion. Jim Rice, he's a professor of international law, joining us live from Philippines. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. Could this sixth day of conflict tip over into direct confrontation between U.S. and Iranian forces, especially in proxy regions like Iraq or Syria?
Thanks for having me on. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback here. I certainly hope not. I hope that this situation de-escalates and calms down. However, this inflammatory and dangerous rhetoric from Trump is certainly not helping anything. In fact, it's creating chaos rather than trying to stabilize the situation. In terms of your question more precisely, in terms of other regions such as Iraq and Syria, that is hard to speculate on, as Syria seems to, the regime has been overthrown, and Syria is obviously now in a rebuilding process. In terms of Iraq, it's very hard to tell whether the conflict will spread, but the problem is that what Trump is doing is destabilizing the situation. And were the United States to get involved, such as using bunker buster bombs to try and bomb the nuclear sites, this would undoubtedly deepen and spread the conflict.
And does Israel's call for civilian evacuations in Iran, Tehran, meet international humanitarian law standards?
No, because the use of force is prohibited under the United Nations Charter. Also, I think that the demand that Trump made by tweet for unconditional surrender, it constitutes a threat of force. So in my view, under international law, that is a threat of force which is prohibited under international law.
And according to you, how unified is Israeli public opinion behind Prime Minister Netanyahu's military campaign, especially after high-profile strikes like the one on Iran's nuclear sites and killing of General Shadmani? Is there visible dissent within Israel?
I can't speak for the popular opinion in Israel in terms of their views regarding Netanyahu in this present conflict. But I will say that there is a very, very powerful opposition movement arising out of Netanyahu's failure to end the Gaza war. And if I can just pivot slightly, I just need to speak out in terms of international law that the use of force and firing artillery or tanks on civilians queuing for aid in Gaza feeding places is unacceptable and completely illegal under international law. I'm sorry if I digress from your original question.
Don't worry about it. And now we move on to the bigger picture. Could this conflict shift alliances in the Middle East, for example, pushing Iran closer to China or Russia?
Well, I mean, they already are. I don't really see the danger of that. Iran has been closely aligned with Putin in Russia for some time, as well as China. So I don't think that this will shift because those countries are already fairly closely aligned.
And now that we are entering the 6th day, what are the implications of prolonged Israeli strikes on Iran's internal political stability, especially given economic pressure and airspace breaches?
Well, the wider implications of a longer war are just bad worldwide. For example, I can imagine that oil prices will be spiking all over the world, and this is going to affect us in the Philippines and probably people in India and in the United States and everywhere else. But your question, can you just repeat the last part of your question again?
Yes. So how will the strikes on Iran's internal political stability, especially given economic pressure and airspace breaches?
That's a very good question. And I really wish I knew the answer, but my view is that the Iranian regime, which has gone on since 1979, which has been cruel, inhumane, a consistent violator of human rights, I believe that the Iranian regime is as unpopular and hated right now as it ever has been. So in terms of whether this conflict goes on, which I hope it doesn't, I would see that this will tend to weaken the control of the totalitarian mullahs over the country. But it seems to me that this weakening will occur whether the war goes on or not.
And looking back at Middle East, how might Gulf states like Saudi Arabia and the UAE adjust their position as the US hardens its stance against Iran?
That's another good question. Thanks for that. My view is that given the animosity, the animus between Iran and the Gulf states, I would say that this will that although outwardly they're probably expressing anger and disapproval for their own domestic populations, I suspect that secretly they're quietly happy about Iran being subjected to this present conflict.
Thank you very much for joining us today. Now we move on to our next story.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ukrainian President